Cyclone Megan persists over the Northern Territory of Australia. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for March 19th. Well, we're down to code blue once again as the two systems, Megan particularly, is winding down. Both of them, 18S as well, still going, both at depression status, and we're still stuck at 12 storms so far this year around the world. First to the Atlantic, where it's 73 days until hurricane season. No areas of interest currently right now, but a big frontal band moving across the Atlantic Ocean that was what was once the severe weather that was occurring in the US a few days ago. In the Eastern Pacific, it's 56 days until hurricane season begins here, and as you can see, there's not too much going on. A very large system towards the northwest of Hawaii, but very little going on across the basin as a whole. The Western Pacific is also relatively quiet, with one or two just little areas of convection blowing up over the Micronesian islands and maybe even further east than that. Over the Indian region, there are a few little storms blowing up over the eastern part of India and over Thailand in the course of this evening. And in the southern hemisphere, we've got Tropical Depression Megan, of course, and 18S. Megan made landfall just over a day ago as probably a high-end Category 1 still by that point, or maybe a low-end Category 2, and has moved inland and has weakened substantially, still at depression status though at this point. In the southwest Indian Ocean, there's no areas of interest right now. You can just about make out 18S almost about to enter the frame. It will eventually, and it will at some point probably cross into the southwest Indian Ocean. Still not for certain whether that will happen. The basin though is quiet. In the South Pacific, there is that little system or two that we were watching earlier on the left hand side of the screen, moving quickly towards the southeast, but as far as tropical chances are going, they're not going to become cyclones. Their window has shut. Well, keeping tabs on Megan right now, it's 51 kilometers from Banka Banka, 54 from Three Ways Roadhouse, 75 from Tennant Creek, 522 from Alice Springs, well south, and 824 from Darwin. Goes to show that it is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. So very few people will be being affected by this storm, and indeed that was the case near landfall. Thankfully the core of the storm missed Borroloola, although they probably still received some fairly strong winds. Well, here is Tropical Depression 18S, the system that really won't give up. JTWC gave up on it yesterday, and I think that's a very foolish move. 460 kilometers from Exmouth right now, 475 from Barrow Island, 509 from Onslow, 554 from Coral Bay down the west coast, and 1096 from Christmas Island, still very far away, and its eventual movement will be probably west-southwest. Still moving fairly slowly, but it has started to pick up just a little bit as it starts to move further away from Australia. Satellite imagery right now looks like this. You can still see both of the systems on the frame, and honestly 18S is looking probably the best we've seen it really. Certainly getting that structure improved. Megan looks like a classic system's moved inland, although over the Northern Territory of Australia we get massive brown ocean effect, and you can see the system is holding itself pretty well and probably will continue to do so for a day or two. Here's another close-up of it right now. That was visible imagery for the last few frames there into the overnight imagery there. Losing its rotation very much, really slackening up, but still some decent amounts of convection blowing up, but very little populations are being affected by that, thankfully. Nonetheless, it will still produce significant amounts of rainfall and high rain rates. That's what can lead to flash flooding. But where the landfall zone was, the rain has pretty much ended. And that's the Zare imagery there as well, showing that cloud tops still in a few spots into the -70s. Radar isn't very useful because it's in a bit of a black spot for the radar, so there's not much that we can see at all. Low level though, it does give you hints that there's still some very large scale rotation going on, and probably still pretty tight near the center at the low levels. Up towards the Northern Territory top end, still a few thunderstorms blowing up all across that region. Now this is 18S, honestly looking pretty good on this latest imagery. I didn't have time to actually check the other estimates, ask at if it got to the system or not, but 35 miles per hour seems to be a safe bet, although it does look at any time that it could strengthen to tropical storm status once again, and models are still eager to develop this system further, as you'll see in a couple of moments. Just a few other incidental things to look at. The Atlantic, I think there were freeze warnings across large parts of the US overnight, and you can see it's pretty chilly on those colours. And towards the right hand side there, that big front moving through. Just look quickly at Alaska there. That's a very large amount of rain approaching that area too. And this is India and Indochina, where there's been quite a few thunderstorms this evening as well, particularly over Thailand. Sea surface temperatures look like this, and they're starting to pick up a little bit more in the eastern Pacific, but still that big swathe of cooler waters towards the equator right now, sure sign of this potential La Nina. The Atlantic really starting to warm up, some warmer temperatures entering the Gulf, and the Gulf Stream off the coast of Florida up to 26 degrees Celsius. The Western Pacific seems to be getting more balanced as well, the South China Sea really warming up in the last few days, especially further west where it takes longer to catch up to about 26 degrees or more in a few spots. North Indian Ocean, those waters really reaching almost all of the Bay of Bengal coastline now, just a few spots left unvisited by the 26 degrees Celsius waters, and really getting warm at the lower latitudes, up and above 30 degrees Celsius in the Andaman Sea. Southwest Indian Ocean, the Mozambique Channel is still piping hot between Madagascar and northern Mozambique, over 30 degrees Celsius. For Mauritius, it's around 28 degrees. And this is Australia right now, off the coast of Western Australia, still very warm, above 30 degrees Celsius. The Bonaparte Gulf above 30 degrees, 32 even, and in the Gulf of Carpentaria still very warm even after the passage of Megan. The South Pacific still looking good as well, near American Samoa and Fiji, very warm temperatures, 32 degrees, maybe even a tad higher than that. Around Fiji it's around 29 degrees, and similar around Vanuatu. Compared to average, it looks like this. The orange zones are above average, the blue zones are below average, the Atlantic very much above average over large parts there. The Western Pacific still fairly close to normal, and in the Southwest Indian Ocean, looks like the mid-latitudes are starting to get a little bit closer to normal as well, but still generally a bit above average. On the Australian region, quite a few areas just sinking slightly below normal, obviously due to the recent storms, but still that doesn't mean it's cold, it's very warm. Oceanic heat content is still sky high over large parts of the South Pacific, including the Coral Sea, where we could see more activity. And in the northern Pacific, you can see the East Pac starting to get some greens in there now. It's only March. The Western Pacific really looking good there as well. Guam extending westwards to the Philippines as usual, looking good, and extending further east as well. So the GFS computer model shows this scenario for 18S. Will it ever get that name? Well, it will if it goes on like this. There it is, becoming a substantial cyclone actually. The Bureau of Meteorology are also on board with it becoming a Category 1 cyclone towards the end of the 5-day period. They backed off earlier, but they've actually put it back on the radar again. There it is once again, moving westwards, away from land of course, strengthening, possibly reaching Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, then drifting southwestwards. Whether it enters the Southwest Indian Ocean or not sure. There's Megan moving inland, moving westwards quite clearly. Very broad as it gets there. Some strong winds on the southern side which start to abate after day 2 or so, and what's left of its influence will somewhere reach the coast of the Kimberley probably by the time we get towards the end of the 5-day period. So apart from our established systems, there's nothing new on the radar in the next 5 days. Looking at precipitation expectations for this region as well over the next 7 days, we're still expecting a few areas to receive very large rainfall amounts on top of what's already occurred, mainly along the area that received Megan's landfall. You can see some red zones there. That denotes fairly high rainfall, around 300 millimeters or so, and parts of the Cape York Peninsula also getting up close to those values as well, above 200 millimeters for a few areas there, and along the east coast for a few regions, including Cairns, maybe getting up and above 150 millimeters. Northern Territory, a few spots there in the interior getting up and above 150 millimeters. The Darwin area expecting maybe 50 in the next 7 days. And further south, maybe a little bit of rainfall there in the Numbulwar area, around 150 millimeters. Well, in the longer range, there's only 18S to look at, actually. And there it is. It drifts southwards. It gets hooked, actually, and it swivels off towards the southeast, just missing the southwestern coast of Western Australia. Obviously, a remnant low by that point, or extratropical cyclone, as it follows behind another extratropical development there that really blows up to its south around about the 25th. And that's all we have in the normal range. It's somewhat quiet. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. And as ever, are still waiting for a Hone t-shirt. Surely it's going to be replaced by something soon, but we still haven't found a Hone, so I guess it's open season. Well, in the Scilly range, honestly, there really isn't much to look at as well, but if there is going to be anything, it's another one for the Gulf of Carpentaria. Look at that. There's a brief tropical storm there, doesn't last very long, doesn't even make it to land before weakening to a depression again. That's as we enter the early days of April, then moves inland over the Northern Territory, what's left of it. So an absolute discount Megan there, a quite extreme version as well, very weak, doesn't last very long. And that's really all we've got on the models for the next 16 days, quite unusual. On this day we go back to 2009, where we had Cyclone Ilsa. Not the one that most people know now, but another one, a Category 3 Ilsa that was moving out to sea towards the west. Similar track to 18S, actually, just a bit further north. Looked really decent on that satellite image, of course, there. We also had Ken, which was moving very quickly southwestwards, well south of French Polynesia, and was just about to turn post-tropical today. And that was on this day 15 years ago, would you believe? And that, of course, was the year that I started tracking properly. Well, in the Atlantic, the first name this season is Alberto. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Aletta, and in the Central Pacific, it will be Hone, obviously. Code Blue, still in effect for Megan, but it won't last much longer. In the Western Pacific, Iwinyar is next up. In the North Indian Ocean, it's still Remal. Of course, 12 storms so far around the world this season, got quite a long way to go. And in the Australian region then, the next name will now be Neville. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, it's Gamane, and in the South Pacific, it is Peter. Well, that's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow.